Welcome everybody. Today we are going to talk about how you can take your wheel thrown form and turn it into a mug. So the things we're looking for, the body needs to be wheel thrown. So this is a piece that I made on the wheel. You need to trim the bottom. So there's a separate video that explains this process. You can do it by hand or you can do it on the wheel. And then you need to have a handle. And you need to do something with surface decoration on the surface. We're not just picking one glaze and just covering it. You've got to do some detail work. But today we're mostly going to focus on the handle. So there are different techniques you can use to create handles. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of those to begin with. So some of the more basic ways of creating handles is to roll a slab. So this is a slab that I rolled with a rolling pin. It's pretty imperfect. It's just a long rectangle. And if I was going to use this as my handle, what I would want to do is add water to the surface to smooth the whole thing and make sure the shape is really ideal. So in this case, I'm kind of using pressure on the table to kind of shape it. This might feel a little thick for a handle, so I might go in and trim some off so it gets more narrow, let's say in the middle. But the main thing is with a handle, you've got to think of it supporting the weight of the mug that you created, and also think of it creating the weight of the mug plus all of the liquid. So as you're designing it, keep that in mind as far as the thickness goes. Also keep in mind, the more you bend your clay as you're experimenting or figuring it out, the more chance for cracks and stretching in here. So you want to be really thoughtful about it. I would do most of your shaping while it's laying on the table. You can see I'm also doing a lot of the smoothing while it's flat, because once it's attached to your mug, it's just a little bit easier to clean up. So this, I don't know if it's the correct length for what I want, but I've done a lot of smoothing. I've done some basic shaping. And now what I can do is hold it up to my form and I can see if it kind of create the curve that I'd like. Okay, it is way longer, but what I'm gonna do is plan on cutting some of that off after. So let's say this is what I really like, what I have right here, okay? Something like that. What I would now do with this is I would lay it down in that exact position off to the side somewhere so it can start to become leather hard. Okay, two other basic ways that you can make handles. So that was with slab. Coil, so long, thin coil. Remember, you can just roll using your fingers. Now you can leave it this kind of rounded shape, or you can always press it down if you like more of an angular look, like the way that the slab looks. But the main thing is you want to do the same thing. So you want to smooth it, make it longer than what you need as you're planning to shape. A handle can be any shape really. It could be a perfect U. It could be bigger on top, smaller on the bottom. It can be more angular. So if you want it to be more square, all of those choices can kind of help to enhance the form that you created. Okay, so that's with the coil. The last one I'm going to show you, this is the one most studio potters use. It's a little more advanced. So basically you take a bowl of water and you take a big chunk of clay, way bigger than you think you need. This is probably not quite enough. Typically I'd use about double the clay. And I just start pinching it so it tapers down into a cone. So what I'm doing is adding water to the surface. I'm spinning the clay that I'm holding onto, and I'm basically stretching the clay. So my fingers are kind of pinching and wrapping around to kind of draw it into the shape of a handle. This one, since it is the most advanced technique, it does take practice. You can see I just made a mistake here. I pinched a little too hard and it broke off. So if I want to use this technique, that's why you have so much extra clay, so that if you do make a mistake, you can just pinch a little more down to start to form it. All right, I can keep turning it so it's consistent on each side. If I want to start kind of creating a more angular or flat look, I might change how I'm pinching it. And let's say I think this is long enough. What you can then do is kind of get a curve that you like. You can take a tool and cut that part off. And just like the other ones, we're gonna leave it off to the side in the position that I want so it can become leather hard. Okay, so those are our three possibilities for making handles. There are way more, but those are the basics. I'm gonna show you how you'd attach it to your form now. All right, so this is a leather hard mug. I've cleaned it up. I like the bottom. So I'm ready to do my attaching with my handle, because my handle that I actually created is leather hard. You don't want to attach the handle when it's plastic because it will sag. You want them to be pretty similar consistencies. Otherwise you'll have some cracking around the seam. So the first step here is that I need to think through where I want it to attach and kind of finalize the shape. So I kind of like the look that you're seeing here. It's a little bit angled, so it kind of mimics the form, but it still has a little bit of a curve to it. So I'm just doing some like little precision type things before I attach it to get the shape what I want. Now, you might notice I have a mark down here and a mark up here. It is critical that you take time to plan out where you're going to be attaching it. So you want to be looking at it from different angles to make sure that it's sitting straight. Once you feel like you like it from this angle and you got it from the side angle, you want to take your needle tool, basically trace the edges so that we know exactly where you should be slipping and scoring. All right, next I would go and slip and score. Because the handle is going to take the brunt of the weight of this form, it is critical that you really scratch. So if you look there, I am scratching up that seam quite a bit, right in the places where I'm planning on attaching it. I would do the same thing with the handle. And then you know your next step would be to add slip. And then because this is so important, we're going to want to use a Band-Aid coil as well. Okay, so I got my slip on there, ready to attach, if I can find it. Okay, so you're not just setting it against, you really want to push the clay into the form so they really fuse and become one. If your clay is slightly soft, you might be able to do what I'm doing here, which is kind of smoothing the forms together in places. But this is really where the Band-Aid coil comes in too. And before actually stopping, I'm gonna line it up, make sure it's sitting straight, right? If I need to do any adjustments while it's a little softer, I can do that as well. And then as far as your Band-Aid coil goes, around each of them, even if it's awkward to get to, you really wanna take the tiniest bit of clay and wrap it around. You can go and clean and cut a lot of this off after if you don't like the aesthetic look of it, but it's really important that you get it into the seam, and using like a wooden tool or even your finger if you can get it in there, you want to fuse the two together. Last thing, while this is drying, it doesn't hurt to take some extra clay, basically set it underneath to kind of hold and support the weight as it's drying. Then the last thing you do, if you're going to carve anything into the surface or add on, you can do that. Put your name on the bottom and your mug is done.